Okay, hey everybody, we're back. We're going to talk about the architecture of Thorium really quick, and also go over some of the terminology which we use for these simulations, and then some terminology which Thorium uses that's a little bit different from what's been used before, because Thorium is a little bit more complicated than what's been used before. So to start out, just by raise of hands, how many of you have done a Space Center live action role play experience? Everybody in here? Okay, good. Except Chuck. Chuck.
I sat behind the scenes.
He's been behind the scenes, so he knows what we're talking about. Yeah, sorry for picking on you, Chuck. Yeah, so you get the idea. You have the crew that's on the bridge of the ship, and each of them has a job, a position, and they work at their computer station. I hope you're noticing where I'm bolding the words in this little monologue. Those are the key words. So you've got the ship, and you've got the crew, and you've got the station, and you've got the flight director who sits behind the scenes. They use their computer terminal, which we call core, to manipulate what's going on in the simulation, and that's what Thorium is for. You have the client, the crew computers that are running on the bridge of the ship, and you have the flight director's core that's running behind the scenes. Thorium also takes care of a couple of like show control stuff, like the view screen, which is at the very front of the ship that lets you see out into space, so you can change that using Thorium. Sound effects. If any of you read the blog post from today, I'm right now working on a premium feature for Thorium for lighting control. More details on that in the future. So yeah, Thorium basically brings all of this stuff together and allows you to run these bridge simulations with a lot of interactivity and a lot of effects. It doesn't have to be for spaceships either. I've talked with other people, like Matt and I have had conversations about using it for escape rooms. You could do that, I suppose, if you really wanted to. You could use it for submarine simulations. I've talked with other people about doing that, because apparently there's this grant for people that make submarine simulators. So hey, maybe that would be an interesting thing. Anyway, so yeah, basically the idea is the way that Thorium itself is architected. Well, let me talk about how other stuff was architected and why Thorium's a little bit better than that. And also Mercury does it in a similar way that Thorium does it. In the old days, back when Victor Williamson, who kind of started this Space Center shindig, he wrote the original simulator controls in HyperCard, and it was literally like just buttons that you could push, but they didn't really do anything. And he would use screen sharing software to see what everybody's doing, and you'd have to watch and catch when people are pushing the buttons. That was back in the 90s, like the early 90s. Eventually somebody got smart and said, okay, what if we were to make it so these computers actually talk to each other? And the first networked simulator controls were developed. And the way that it worked was you have your core computers that are in the control room, and you had the bridge computers that were here on the bridge, and whenever anything happened, these bridge computers, whenever I click a button, they would send a message to these core computers. And the core computers showed very static things. I can actually show you what the cores looked like, because I have some screenshots here. So this isn't the original simulator controls, but this is an old set of controls, the core. And this is the main core, and you couldn't configure this at all. It just looked like this. This is what you had to work with. And then the aux core looked like this, totally different for totally different functions. So you have these computers that they're using in the back end, and they can control these to do stuff on the bridge, and when the bridge would do stuff, it would send messages here. The only problem is the messages weren't being persisted anywhere but on the stations themselves. So suppose this computer dies, and it's not there, and these computers try sending messages to this computer, it's not going to get those messages. And then when it comes back up, it's like, hey, I don't remember anything that just happened. And it was really frustrating and annoying. And those of us that worked at the Space Center back when we used to use controls like this understand the pain. So, yeah, exactly. So a new set of controls was developed called Mercury, which is really like revolutionary in a lot of things that it was able to do. The first thing is, instead of having all of the clients talking to all of the cores, you have the cores and the clients talking to a central server, and that server has the database of all of the information that's going on inside the simulation. Whenever anybody changes anything, it sends a message to the database and says, this just changed, and this just changed. And then the database, that central server, sends messages to all of the people that care about that information. Correct me if I'm wrong, John, but sends all the message to all of the people that care about that information and said, by the way, this just changed. Okay? So suppose this guy dies, and messages are coming into the central server, and then when this guy comes back up, he says, hey server, tell me what the information is. And it says, here you go, I've got the latest for you, and it comes right back up exactly where it's supposed to be based on where the simulation is at. So major improvement over what was happening before. Another cool thing is that the stations, which originally were very static, and each station had the different screens that it had, and it could only have those screens, and each core only looked the way that it looked, and you couldn't configure it at all. Now you could actually configure which screens are on which stations and how the core is configured and all of that, which means instead of having a set of controls, it used to be that programmers would have to design a set of controls for every single simulator that were different. Now you could make a bunch of pieces. What do you call it in Mercury? You call it cards? Okay, cards. You make cards, and these cards are the individual screens that you have on these stations, and then you assign the cards to the different stations, and those can go wherever you want them to go. It doesn't matter, which means you can configure different simulators to be different. So Thorium took that model and kind of ran with it, made a couple of changes and a couple of improvements, but it's very similar conceptually to how that works, where you have a central server that has all of the information, and that all of the commands, all of the changes that the clients are sending, they go to that central server, and then any information that needs to go out whenever anything changes is sent out to the client so that they can update with the new information. Okay? So far so good? Are there any questions? Good. Awesome. So, let's talk about Thorium specifically. When it really comes down to it, I designed Thorium with the intention of making it so that you didn't have to install complicated software on every computer. It's built with web technologies, and every desktop computer nowadays has a web browser on it. Granted, it doesn't work in Edge, so don't try using it in Edge. But it works in Chrome really great, and it works okay in Firefox. I haven't really tried it in Firefox. But that's the thing. You can get these web browsers for free. You can run them on any modern computer, and anybody can play with Thorium really quickly. You'll notice we had all of these computers over here set up. They've all gone to sleep, so you can't see them. But they had Thorium set up and running in Chrome. That means that all you have to do is just download the server. That's the complicated piece of software, and it only has to run on one computer, and then all of the other computers connect to that one computer and display the web page that is Thorium. And then you can use the controls. You can go to town. It makes it really easy to just run a spaceship in your apartment or in your house. Bring your own computer. You set up a computer on the TV for the view screen, and you assign everybody their screens, and you have somebody sitting in another room or whatever, however you want to do it, with their little core computer, and everybody has their computers, and you can do a little space simulation in your house. That was kind of the goal. I wanted to make it so that it was robust enough for very realistic space simulations in these space centers with the sets and the lights and the sounds and stuff. But I also wanted to make it so you could do it in your own house if you really wanted to. Yeah.
Really quick, Alex, haven't I seen that anything that you can send Wi-Fi to, that you can have the sounds and the lights and stuff like that? So even if you're doing it in the home, if you had those little auxiliary situations that have Wi-Fi on, you could still control them, so you can create a simulator even in a little house?
Theoretically, absolutely. Yeah. So Thorium is set up so that you can set up a sound player and play your sound effects through Thorium. So you just get a little computer connected to a speaker and you've got sounds. Like I said earlier, I'm working on lighting control, and I don't have anything as sophisticated as being able to send messages out to like Philips Hues or whatever, but that's something that you totally could do. One of the best lessons that I ever learned about programming is that if you're a programmer and you have access to the computer, you can literally do whatever you want. Sometimes it's really hard, but if you wanted to hook up Thorium to Philips Hues or whatever kind of lighting system you have, if it is able to receive messages and be controlled by something, then you could totally do that. Yeah, Philips Hues are those fancy lights that you screw into your light bulb, and they have Wi-Fi, and you can send messages, and they can turn colors, and it's super fancy. So yeah, no, Crystal and I actually kind of want to build a spaceship / dance studio. It would be dual purpose in our house whenever we get a house, so that we can run spaceship missions in our house. So that'd be cool. Huh? Well, so that's the thing. The ship actually only works through interpretive dance. So yeah, it's one of those. It's a weird alien ship. You know, you ever see, what was it? I can't remember, the do-do-do-do-do movie. Anyway, but it's interpretive dance instead. Cool. So there is a special client application that you can run. You can actually download it from Thorium and run it. And what it does is it locks down your computer so you can't quit out of the station. And it gives you a couple other features that web browsers don't give you, because if you were able to navigate to a web browser or a website and it was able to shut down your computer, that wouldn't be good. But all that it is a glorified web browser. So I literally do all of Thorium's development just in Chrome. So that makes it really easy and convenient. Any questions so far? Cool. Yeah, Matt.
Explain how the, I might have missed this, but you explain how the general architecture of the stations work. How's Thorium?
Yeah, so Thorium's just a little bit different conceptually. It still has that same concept where you assign a station to a client, okay? So, vocabulary. I consider a client to be any single computer running a web browser connected to Thorium, okay? So if I were to go to my Thorium site, which I don't know if it's running right now, actually. Are we running? Yeah, we're running. Okay. If I go to localhost 3000/client, it would be this IP address if you weren't on my computer. This right here I consider to be a client. Clients can run stations. If I come here to my, let me try this again. If I come here to my client config, I actually am stealing the configuration which they use at the Lionsgate Center. Thank you, Nathan. I can assign any one of these stations to this client, okay? I have a couple of default stations like the view screen, the sound player, and just blackout, which blacks out the screen. And then I have these stations here, which are actually part of this simulator, okay? So now we have this concept of a simulator. Let me go back to stations really quick, and I'll switch it to internal communication, sure. Stations have cards, and remember those cards are the individual screens that you develop and show on the screen. And I can assign whatever cards I want to whatever station I want. So here's an internal communication screen where I can choose a deck on the ship, and I can choose a room, and I can call that room on the ship. And hey, there it is. Or I also have the language translation keys, awesome, where I can choose these, okay? These are individual cards, these screens that I'm switching between, and I can assign those to any station that I want, okay? And I have all the stations that are part of my simulator, okay? What's a simulator? It is the concept of a ship flying through space, or I mean, whatever. A simulator is a thing that has stations. It has some other properties about it that are more imaginary than actual, but that are used in the simulation. So for example, this particular simulator that I have, it has some pictures that show what it looked like. This is one of those pictures. This is actually the default picture that's bundled with Thorium, but you can use whatever picture you want for whatever simulator you config. It has decks, which are the floors of the ship. And it has rooms, which are the rooms inside of those floors. And yeah, there are a lot of other properties which simulators have, but that's just a little idea of what simulators are, okay? Let's go up one more level really quick. Here, when I'm assigning the clients, I have my simulator here, which I can choose, and I only have one simulator, so great. And then I also have flights. Anytime anybody is doing a mission with Thorium, anytime you have a bunch of people getting together, using a simulator, they have their stations, they have their clients, they're all connected, and they're doing this game together, I call that a flight, okay? I decided to make it so that Thorium has these individual instances of flights, whereas before in Mercury and in the older controls, you didn't really have the concept of a flight, you just had the simulator, and anytime a new flight was beginning, you would just wipe the simulator clean, and all of the stuff, all of the attributes for it, and then continue on. But you didn't have the ability to save your flight, and then go back and start a new flight and do that new flight all the way through and then come back to this flight, which I think is a really convenient feature for people like the Farpoint Center up at Renaissance. They do their long duration missions, which go over the course of several weeks, and they want to keep track of what's going on in the simulation between those sessions, and so they're able to save those flights, name the flight, save it, and then come back to it later, which is really convenient in my opinion. I'm the one that made that feature, so of course I think it's great.
Glad you did.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you. Okay, there's one more little wrinkle that is apparent when you're making a new flight. So if I come here, this is the main screen of Thorium, the first thing that you see. And if I go to New Flight, I can name my flight. So we'll call this Developer Workshop. Yay, and I can't spell it. That's fine. And then I pick my simulator. I only have this one simulator configuration. And then I have a station set. This actually is a poor example because they only have the one station set. So let me download this simulator really quick. Hey, we've got the Voyager. And we'll start a new flight. And I'm going to choose the Voyager as my simulator. And you see how it has two different station sets. Okay? What this allows me to do is configure how many stations and the actual configuration of the stations based on what type of flight I'm going to do. So suppose I'm James, and I'm running a ship called the Magellan at Central Elementary, and I get a call for booking, and they say, I want to fly the Magellan, and we're bringing 14 people. And I say, great, that's awesome, we can fly you with 14 people. And then they show up, and they say, just kidding, 2 people couldn't come with us, we only have 12 people. Or just kidding, we actually had 2 extra people tag along, so we've got 16 people, okay? That happens all the time, yeah. Fortunately, the Magellan does have 16 computers, so they actually do have a place to sit each person, but they don't have 16 different stations that they can do. They only have 14 stations, 14 configurations of these cards that they can do with the older versions of the controls. With Thorium, though, you're able to configure station sets, which let you say, I want to have this station set that has 8 stations. I want to have this station set that has 12 stations. So for example, this one has, it actually doesn't have as many cards as the 10 standard because I added some extra cards to extra stations. So this one has an additional medical station and an additional counterintelligence station. All of that can be configured. I'm just letting you know that you can pick different station sets. Another example, I'm James. And James says, I'm going to run a private flight for a bunch of teenagers or a bunch of adults. I want to have my most complicated station set possible so that they have interesting things to do over the course of the flight. Great. I have a station set that is my 10 advanced station set. Well, the next day I'm running day flights for school children that are coming for a field trip. They don't need to have all of that advanced stuff. They should probably have less cards, less distraction, and the easier stuff to work on. So I have my 10 school flight. It allows me to configure the simulator based on the crew that's coming, based on the crew that I'm working with. It doesn't have to be this complicated. You can just have a single station set for your simulator, but if you want to have that configurability, you totally can. We'll get to missions later on. Actually, we might as well get to missions right now because missions are cool. Any questions so far?
Now what you're saying is that we can create those, save them, and then pull up when? Whenever we want.
Whenever you want. Yep.
Exactly.
Depending on what the crew is, depending on the flight that you're doing, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Give me just a second. We'll find out. So I can configure these simulators here in the back end. This is stuff that just regular people, flight directors and people using Thorium can do without being developers. I can come here to my station configuration and choose the station set, and we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that in this case, the way that I named the station set, I have 8 actual computers. Well, rather 8 stations, okay? Now, suppose I'm running the Magellan and I have 10 people, but I want to split it up so that we have 2 damage control officers and 2 security officers. I would still, unless I wanted to split out cards and have the cards be different, I could put multiple stations, or rather the same station on multiple computers, and it would work just fine. Thorium's designed to do that. So in this case, the way that I named it, it is 8 unique stations, okay? And in this case, it is 10 unique stations that have different cards. Let's talk.
The question is, I think what you said is only one client and station on a computer, right?
Correct.
Can you
One
have
client.
multiple browsers open in a computer and jump from browsers, each one of them a different client with a different station.
The way that web browsers work and the way that I designed Thorium, you can't have multiple browsers open with different stations, asterisk, because we'll get to that. So as a demonstration, I can go localhost client, and hey, here's this internal communications that was there, automatically connected, awesome. And I say I want to do another station. Oh, whoops, it's the same client, okay? Just because of the way that web browsers work, the way that I'm storing the data, each instance of a web browser, even if it's a different tab, is still going to be the same client. Now, winky face, I hope you like this onomatopoeia emoji going on. If I do incognito mode, this pretends to be an entirely different web browser, and so it lets me configure a, oh, that's not what I want. Let me go here. This, and while this is happening, I'm just going to download this mission so we can look at it. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to come here and give this a flight. And we'll say we want this to be computer security. Yeah, security. So now we have our internal communications and we have security. You can do that with incognito windows. If you have a different web browser, like Firefox. Yeah, no.
Well, it is quite complex.
It is a doable thing, certainly. I don't know of a better way to do it, unfortunately. If anybody comes up with a better way, it's open source, so you can totally make it work. But here I can assign this Firefox to be its own station, and it'll do its thing. Neat. There's a little contact there. Yeah. Oh, man. I don't know. I've never tried that before. That could work.
What was the question?
So the question was, in Chrome, let me just demonstrate this really quick. I have this little persona icon up here, and I don't sign in because I'm a punk. I don't trust it. But let me try this. So, hey, magic. And really quick, let me assign this guy to a flight. And there's that. And let's open another guest window. Oh, no, so you can only have one guest window. But if you were to use different personas, if you were to actually sign in, or I don't know if you can create... Yeah, can you add people without... Yeah, it looks like you can. So hey, there's person 2. And we'll go... Ah, you win Clever Person of the Day. That is a neat trick. There we go. So there you go, Chuck.
Make sure that's in the video.
It is in the video. Yep. And I reiterated her question, so you know what the question was. We're good. Okay, I have a ton of browser windows open really quick. I'm going to close these because that's a lot. Awesome. Okay, let's talk about missions really quick. Oh, that's not it. Yeah. There you go. Sorry. So when you go to the Space Center, what happens is you sit down, and this actually is included in the documentation. If you go to thoriumsim.com, there's a little docs button, and it actually has instructions for how to be a flight director for people that have no idea how to be a flight director, which, by the way, all of you should contribute to documentation, and we'll talk about that later today. That's something that anybody can do, and it's not hard. But they come and they say, hey, welcome to the Space Center. I'm so glad that you're here. Let's go give you positions and train you and brief you on your mission. And you give them the positions. You say, you're captain, you're first officer, and your sensors, and your operations, your helm, and all that stuff. And then you say, okay, we have a very important thing for you to do today. We are going to send you to the Romulan neutral zone. Don't sue me, CBS. And we are going to have you explore this little area of space. Patrol it, because we don't trust Romulans. And there's a nebula there, and the Montgomery's in the nebula. And there's this wormhole there. And the USS Ranger has been patrolling this area of space. But oh no, a ship came out of the wormhole, and there's a person there, and they want political asylum, and you should help them. Or you should decide whether or not you want to help them. I don't know how we fly intolerance nowadays, but I always said you guys should choose how you want to help them. So, yay, we're going to go off into space, and we're going to go do that. And then there's a series of events that happens over the course of the mission. So, apologies, I'm going to spoil intolerance for you. If you haven't done that mission before, I'm sorry. It is one of the most popular, one of the most done missions, so it's probably the most likely mission that you've ever done. The way that it works, I don't know, those of you that have been flight directors, you probably understand this concept, this process. Those of you that aren't, when you're flying a mission, you have this story in your head of the different things that have to happen during the mission. And you go through those things point by point. You say, okay, we need to set course for the neutral zone. Okay, we're going to travel to the neutral zone. We're going to get this message at this point during the mission. And it'd be really cool if I was able to, like, just, in fact, let me see. I might have, yeah. Thanks, James, for digitizing these. That's fine. This is good. So notice I've got all of these things. I have this instructions for the Federation ambassador that is a message that's printed and given to them. I have these coded messages that come through the long-range station that they have to decode. Actually, those were printed technically. I have this thing that the sensors officer has to do. And right here, this is the actual script. Although I'm missing some things here, but that's fine. Here we go, the intolerance script. And the way that it worked, at least at the Central Space Center, is you have what's called a tactical stack, which is like a glorified PowerPoint. And this is the presentation notes for that PowerPoint. And all that it was is just screens that show up, and you go to the next screen, and it shows you what's going on there. So here, we use the card terminology a lot for a lot of things. In this case, we're card 1, which is the first screen, and this is just inner-ship screens. And then you have all of this stuff that shows up at different places. And it gives instructions for what you're supposed to do, like print these 2 messages, and then right here, here's all this stuff that has to happen. And those are some acting segments. Let's come back up here. And it gives instructions for how you're supposed to do this mission. So it's basically a script that you're able to follow, and you do these things. It wasn't automated at all, though. So you would click next card, and it would show that thing, and then you'd have to go and do all of these things on your computer. With Thorium, since everything's integrated and you're able to do it all together, you can program this timeline of events that you can follow. So here's my intolerance timeline of events. And it actually isn't very well fleshed out, I'm afraid. But you'll see here, each step has its name, and then I can also give it a description for what's going on at that point in the mission. So I can create the script. And then I have these things that I can do with Thorium. Like here, I set some preset scan answers, which I'm not going to explain that. I have my sensor contacts that are all messed up, I'm afraid, so I'll have to figure that out. And then I have my startup message, which is a long-range message being sent from Starbase 74 to the ship, which I need to change that. Fire mission. Here's another message that's being sent. Here's another view screen thing that gets shown up on the view screen. Here's all of these things that we show. Okay, that's basically the way that missions work. Any questions about that? I kind of went over that really quickly, but this is kind of boring right now and doesn't really go into development much. Okay, John first. Yes. So let me show you how that works. I can choose any of these events. So the way that Thorium works, it's an event-based system in the back end. So anytime anyone does anything on their computer, anytime they push a button, anytime they type something in, anytime, well, I shouldn't say anytime, but in a lot of cases, anytime something's being sent to that main central server, it's sent as an event, okay? And right here, I'm specifying events that I want to send with these timeline actions. So when I say, do this action, it's going to perform all of these events, and I can choose from any of these events, okay? These are pre-configured in code. These aren't all the events that happen in Thorium. There's actually like several hundred possible events that can happen. These are just ones that have been pre-configured with some configuration that I can set myself. So I have to do a little bit of programming to add these in. But the point is any of those events could be set up as a timeline event if I were to do the little bit of programming necessary. So that's where the programming comes in, is creating these, what I call them macros, of things that you can do as part of the simulation. Okay, and you can do any of these. They're registered both on the back end. We'll get to that when we do the back end dive, but they're registered in both the back end, and then the front end knows which have been registered in the back end and knows what to display here. No, it's universal. Let me show you how it works. That'll probably be better visually. So if I come here to my mission, and I come here to my core, over here on the side, so there are several different core layouts. Okay, so again, let me talk about core really quick, and then I'll get to your, well, let me get to your question right now, because it'll be easy. I have my mission here, and I have my buttons to switch between the timeline. I have the timeline item name here, and then the description down here. And I can jump through those like this, and that doesn't do anything. Clicking the play button will actually execute that action. So if I come back here to the first action, this is going to change my army contacts, and you'll see that change over here. And it looks messed up because this mission is weird. So I have to fix this mission.
Those can be multiple things going up and multiple columns.
All at the same time. Yep, and you just push the button. Yep, it really takes a lot of hassle off the flight director if they choose to use this. Yeah. Yeah, so this creates sensor presets, which is like scan answers. So if I go to the sensors core, I can see all of that info that I just created here has shown up right here. It added my sensor presets over here. It sent a startup message via long range, which you'll just have to take my word for it. That did get sent. And then it also put this component on the view screen. Okay, so it did all of that. Sure. I mean, you could always pull up the card if you really wanted to, but I do have a core that's called the convo core that shows me all of the messages that have been sent out and back. So here I can see this message got sent out to the USS Phoenix from Starbase 74. It isn't the Phoenix in this case because I messed up and I need to fix that. Bear with me. Any other questions? Okay. We'll take a quick break in a little bit, and then we have pizza in half an hour or 40 minutes. So bear with me while I go over the core really quick. This is the brains of the operation. This is where the flight director can see everything that happens and send out any stuff that they want to happen on their screens. So for example, let me just split screen this really quick. That was not how we split screen. Thank you. And I'm actually going to have this be sensors. And we got our fancy sensors grid here, and we've got our little sensors contact let me go that back to the core. And you can see here on my sensors core here, you can see the contact. And anytime I change anything here, it's going to update over here on their screen. Pretty simple concept, right? But this also gives me a couple more superpowers as the flight director. The timeline is definitely a superpower. It allows me to do a lot of stuff that would otherwise require me to pull up several different cores and do different things in different places. Now I can just use the timeline to perform all of the actions that are part of the mission itself. And I don't know if you noticed, but I have these checkboxes here. So if there's a particular action that I don't want to perform, I can always uncheck it, and then it won't happen with the timeline. So that's nice. Another thing is actionable items. Anything that they do that I should do something about will come in as a core feed item. So down here is what I call the core feed. It's kind of like your Twitter notifications, but for spaceships. And I also have notifications that can come in as little toasts up here, which I think is so funny, toast, because it pops up right here. And then I can also have it speak. So when I perform a sensor scan, like I'm going to scan for Matrix, and hit begin scan.
External scan.
It's going to say that so I can hear it. I have aural notification, I have the visual notification here, and then I have the core feed item that showed up here. And I can click on this, see what was scanned for, and type in my answer. And then I'll just, oh, that wasn't the button I want. I'll do that. There you go. So, super convenient for the flight director. They can configure what items they want to see on the core feed. You can configure what items you want to see on the notifications. So if you do have a main core and an aux core, so two different cores, this guy can focus on what he needs to focus on, this girl can focus on what she needs to focus on, and everything will be great. But I have different core layouts based on different needs, different things that you might want to do. So I have the two core layouts that I absolutely hate, but I'll show them to you anyway. This is kind of the way that it was before, where you have a static layout that doesn't ever change. This is just the way that your core looks all the time. And you've got everything that you could possibly want there. But it's kind of messy, and it doesn't, I mean, you've got the core feed over here that I put in, you've got the timeline and stuff, but I really don't like it a lot. There are a couple of reasons why I don't like it. We can talk about it later if you want. I have another one for aux core that has all the stuff that somebody performing second chair might want. There's a little bit of overlap between the aux core and main core, like you can see the systems over here. That stays the same. A couple other things, but other than that, it's its own thing. I have the dynamic core, which you kind of saw a little bit earlier. The dynamic core is actually tucked right in here in the next core. This is the dynamic core just shoved in there. But what it does is it lets me choose any core component that I want and put it in here. So I can say I want phasers. And let's split this because I want torpedoes too. So I'll grab my weapons, and I'll get torpedoes, and let's also get some targeting and some shields. And I also want thrusters. And boom, I have everything that I need to run a battle sequence. I can see all the weapons that they're doing, I can see what their shields are like and their thrusters and all that stuff. Let me save this, and I can save this as my battle layout. So then, if I ever get to a point in a mission and I'm like, we need to run a battle, I need to see these things, I just come up here, say, I want to see battle. Boom, there it is. Cool. For the context of this development workshop, each of these individual core components can be developed, and we can make core components that do whatever we want, that connect with whatever systems we want. So as an example, I showed you the Convo core. This is actually a fairly new core that I've developed recently that takes the external communications, the long-range communications being sent out of the ship, and the decoding, and brings them together into one core. I actually still have the decoding core, or I think it's just decoding, which looks like this. That's for messages sent from me to the crew. I see your questions. I'll get you in just a sec. And then I also have the, what would it be? Long-range comm core. There you go. This right here takes both of these cores and merges them together into one. So you can make whatever cores you want that do whatever functionality you want. Okay, John, then Jordan, then we'll keep going. Okay, so there are a couple of events that get sent when somebody changes their shields. Let's demonstrate really quick, just so that we can see this. If I go to tactical, and to my shield control, and we'll go back to my core. And you see I don't have anything going on here. Just for kicks, though, I'll throw up my core feed, and we'll see what happens here.
Shields raised.
So it's sending a notification, which shows up here, and also is saying the words.
So the core feed isn't running, will that still be working?
Yep.
Shields raised.
So that is its own unique event. It also, you noticed, sent the core feed item, which shows up right here. So that's another event.
Core is always listening to all events.
No, no. Core, so in that case, I did not, it's always listening for the notifications. And those come in as a separate event. It's going to trigger an event like that. It also triggers the core feed event. And finally, it's going to trigger the actual event that changes the control. Okay? So if the core feed wasn't here, I wouldn't get the core feed notification because I don't need it. If I didn't have the shield control core up, then I wouldn't get that information. If I pull up shield control core, you'll notice it'll be black for a little bit, and then it'll pull up because it's loading the data, and then as soon as the data loads, it shows up. Okay? And you can see here that it has the updated data. And now, when I change my shields, it's going to modify here based on that. Okay? So it subscribes and unsubscribes based on what's needed. That's one reason why I don't like the main core, because it subscribes to a whole bunch of data, and then that gets messy. I think that it might be improved. I think I've improved the way that it does the updates, but who knows. Jordan. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes. Dynamic core is shared between the actual dynamic core and the next layout, so you can share those. Those layouts are actually stored to the server as well. So if I'm on aux core, I can pull up the battle core that I saved on main core, and vice versa. Matt first, and then James.
So if you said that the core layouts that you on the server, is that on a per-click basis, or is that for something?
That's actually, it's universal. Yeah, it's universal.
That's what I was going to ask, because I was wondering if you have a way of
Yeah, those are saved. So those are saved to your Thorium instance. So I know some space centers have one Thorium server running per server or per simulator, which is fine. It supports that. Thorium was designed to have one server running for multiple simulators, though. So your mileage may vary because we haven't tested it a whole lot with a lot of servers. You're basically the only space center that can do that. Although they are doing it at the Lionsgate Center, so you can wait and see how it goes for them, and then do it at your space center when you feel like it. Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I definitely could make it so you could export it and import it if I really felt like it, if that's something that would be useful for you. It's storing it in the snapshot, yeah. Yep. Yeah, don't get stuff lost. Be careful. Okay. Oh shoot, my live stream cut off for some reason. Maybe, maybe not. Let me check this. Okay, oh, I guess we're good. Cool, hopefully. Let me look at my notes really quick and make sure I got the overview. That was a much longer overview than I was anticipating. Sorry if you got super bored. Really quick, Thorium supports internationalization, so you can translate strings. There's actually some random guy that's been translating Thorium into German, which is really cool. There are very few of the literal strings that support the internationalization. So that's something that people could work on, is go in, find anywhere where there's a literal string, and switch it so that it's internationalized so that other people can come in and translate those strings, which would be so sick if we could have it in like all the languages. That would be awesome. Yeah, Klingon, seriously, why not, man? Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to do it with the font because it's not in Unicode. They need to get Klingon in Unicode, man. They need to do that. But you could do the transliteration of the Klingon words, which would be so sick, man. Oh, can we please? We're going to do that. Oh, except web browsers don't support Klingon as a locale, and it's based on the web browser's locale. Ah, that sucks. We'll figure that out. We'll make it so you can do it in Klingon. Somebody file an issue. Okay, let's talk about what things we can do. Shoot, I am like super behind. I didn't realize it was this late. Thanks for listening to me for so long, guys. We'll get into actual coding soon. But if you go to GitHub, if you haven't been to the Thorium GitHub yet, you just go to github.com/thoriumsim/thorium. And right here in this issue tracker, this is where all of the stuff that should be worked on in Thorium is stored. I try and keep it as open as possible so people know this is what's happening, this is what's going on. I've got a project here which is like the roadmap of stuff that's going on in the future, but I haven't updated that in a while, but I will soon. Basically my priorities and the priorities that other people have asked for. But here you can see all the stuff that needs to be worked on. And I have this help wanted tag for stuff that I think would be good for people that aren't me to work on and to help out with. So there's a number of things here, a number of screens, a number of features, enhancements and stuff that I think anybody could work on. And, oh, actually, we got this environment control one that actually is being worked on by Tyler. So let me throw you on there, Tyler. Thanks, dude. So that's awesome. I also have this items for the workshop, which is a big issue that just has a bunch of little things in it that you can grab and work on. Some of these things are coding. Most of these things are coding. Some of them are design. Like right here, the thruster screen is kind of weird and not super helpful. It'd be awesome if we were to have multiple thruster screens. What would it look like if you were to design something that could turn the ship and make it move forward, back, up, down, port, starboard? How would you design that? So you could sketch that up or explain it. If there are other features that you think would be cool in Thorium, explain how those work and write it down and put it in an issue so that I can work on that. Okay. One more thing that we can work on is documentation. So there's a website, thoriumsim.com, and it's where you get Thorium from. And I write a blog here every week about all the stuff that I've been working on. You should read it because I think I write interesting stuff. And then there's also the documentation, which has this overview about all the stuff that Thorium is and what you should do with it. Frequently asked questions, which there's only one. Thanks, James, for that question. Actual documentation. I've tried to put images in for all the stuff that needs images, but I haven't actually written the documentation because that's kind of time-consuming. So this is totally something you could work on. Each page should have an edit button right here. So if I wanted to configure this main config, if I wanted to write this main config page, I just click this edit button, and it takes me to this admin page. I do require that you log in order to edit documentation, so I know who's editing what. So we don't just get some randos doing random stuff to this website. Yeah, something. But it basically is like Spaceship Wikipedia. So let me click that button again and see if it takes me right to it. There we go. And so right here, if you're like super fancy, you can write it in Markdown, which Markdown's kind of cool, so you can do that if you want. Or right here, you can come in and just write it using this rich text editor. And then when you're done, just click the Save button. And then all of the changes that you make, I review, make sure that they're good and kosher, and make any edits necessary, and then I push it. And then your content is live on thoriumsim.com helping everybody. So that's totally something you can do. Yeah. Let me just, so I'm going to cut off the live stream for a bit, and we'll jump back in with some more content a little bit later. But for right now, we're just going to do kind of workshop-y stuff. So you can work on whatever you want. And yeah.